the whole atom is the size of a football stadium, then the nucleus is the size of a pea to that scale. So how do we know this? In real life, the nucleus is around about 10 to the power minus 15 meters. But how do we know this? What evidence have we got? The first one was the Rutherford scattering experiment, which is how we know the nucleus exists in the first place. Then we're going to look at the idea of closest approach, so how close a charged particle can get to the nucleus without repelling and deflecting backwards. And the last one is electron scattering. So let's look at the Rutherford scattering experiment. So in 1913, the generally accepted idea was that the plum pudding model of the atom was true, meaning a big ball of positive charge with small negative charges distributed throughout. What we expect to happen was that the alpha particles Rutherford fired at the gold foil would all be undeflected, because they would go straight through. There's not enough charge in any one place to deflect them significantly. What he found, though, was slightly different. Most of the particles, the vast majority, followed this. However, some of them were deflected through small angles, and 1 in 10,000 were deflected by over 90 degrees. So in a small scale, looking at the results, something like this. So you can see here some of the particles going straight through, some of them deflecting back. This one will be by more than 90 degrees. This indicates there must be an electrostatic repulsion between the two positive charges, the positive alpha particle and the positive nucleus. So the electromagnetic force must be in play, and it affects all those particles that go close. The idea is the greater the force happens at a smaller distance, because force is inversely proportional to the distance squared, which we should know from Coulomb's law. So the conclusions Rutherford made from this then was that, well, there must be a nucleus, but most of the atom must be empty space, and the positive charge must be in the nucleus, which is extremely small, positive charge, which contains almost all of the atom's mass, and there must be these negative charges, the electrons around the edge, but we'll leave those for the time being. So this became known as Rutherford's model, or the nuclear model of the atom, and it didn't describe how shells exist, it just described electrons as orbiting different distances away, but generally quite far away from the nucleus. And you had to wait till Niels Bohr, around 20 years or so later, to come up with the ideas of electrons existing in discrete shells. So this number here, the number of the particles that are deflected by over 90 degrees, leads us to our first estimate for the size of the nuclear radius. Now, considering the gold foil, let's say it's 1 atom thick, which obviously it's not, but it's an easy assumption to start out with. What that means is that these numbers state 1 in 10,000 deflect by 90 degrees. So therefore, if there were n layers, so 2 layers, 5 layers, 100 layers, we do 1 divided by 10,000 times n. So for n number of layers, we can do a quick derivation to kind of compare the diameter of the nucleus to the diameter of the atom. So the area of the nucleus divided by the area of the atom is equal to 1 over 10,000 n. Now we know area from the kind of two-dimensional point of view of the particle hitting the nucleus is pi d squared over 4. So if I do the area of the nucleus, that's pi d, small case d, diameter of the nucleus squared over 4, divided by pi capital D squared over 4. So this still equals 1 over 10,000 n. Now, cancelling down, we notice that we can cancel down to find the expression for d, the diameter of the nucleus, which is big square root the diameter of the atom, divided by 10,000 n. Now, commonly, the number of atoms in Rutherford's experiment was around about 10,000, so we could kind of place that in place of n and come up with an expression for the ratio of d to d, diameter of the atom versus diameter of the nucleus, and it also equals roughly 1 in 10,000, meaning the scale is 1 to 10,000. So taking this one step further, we're going to look at the idea of closest approach to come up with a more accurate and more precise method and value for the radius of the nucleus. So let's consider an alpha particle heading towards the nucleus. Now the most it can deflect by is 180 degrees, meaning it goes dead onto the nucleus, basically stops, turns around, goes the opposite direction. So when this alpha particle scatters an angle of 180 degrees. So when this happens, let's consider the energy changes that are occurring. So as the alpha particle is moving initially, when it's far away from the nucleus, it has maximum kinetic energy. When it stops and turns round, in that brief moment, its kinetic energy is 0. So by conservation of energy, that energy can't disappear. Where is that energy gone? Well, because the nucleus has a charge, all that kinetic energy is electrostatic or electromagnetic potential energy. So that potential energy is going to be maximum when the kinetic energy is 0, and then it decreases again when the alpha particle starts moving away from the nucleus. So let's put these two values together and let's kind of equate them. So kinetic energy is obviously half mv squared. The electrostatic potential energy, if you do AQA, it's not given to you on your equation sheet, but you do get given the value for potential. Now the potential is equal to this constant 1 over 4 pi epsilon 0 times by the charge divided by r, and we know work done equals charge times potential difference. So therefore we can kind of quickly derive the equation for potential energy is 1 over 4 pi epsilon 0, the two charges multiplied together divided by r. If we equate these two equations together, it gives us an estimate for the radius of the nucleus, the distance from the center of the gold nucleus to the distance the alpha particle stops, turns around and goes back. So let's plug some numbers in and see what we come up with. So let's take for the alpha particle scattering experiment, we've got the first charge is an alpha particle with 2 protons in it. The second charge is gold, which happens to have 79 protons in it. The mass of the alpha particle, we can add together the mass of 2 protons and the mass of 2 neutrons in your equation sheet. And we're going to say the speed here is pretty high for this experiment to yield accurate results. We're going to say 1.5 times 10 to the 7 meters per second. So let's solve this for r. So rearranging the equation, first of all, r equals 1 over 4 pi epsilon 0 q1 q2 over half mv squared, and we can put the 2 to the top of that equation to make it look a bit neater. Next is just about substituting our values in. So all the values from the left are on your formula sheet, the mass of the proton and the neutron as well, or they're so similar here, you could just do 4 times the value of a proton. So putting all these numbers in together, and we come up with a value for r of 4.84 times 10 to the power minus 14 meters, which is fairly close to the estimate we talked about earlier. Now, things that will affect it is just an estimate because the speed of the alpha particles will affect it quite drastically. So if they're going slower, they're not going to get as close, and you aren't really finding the radius of the nucleus. You're essentially finding how close a charged particle can get before deflecting 180 degrees. But it's a fairly decent estimate for now. So let's have a look at electron scattering, so our final method of finding the radius of the nucleus. So we're going to fire electrons at atoms and use their wave-like properties to see their diffraction pattern, which is the quantum physics you will have learnt hopefully earlier in the course. So let's consider our electrons, which are behaving like waves. So we're going to draw them as wavefronts heading towards our material, which has a bunch of nuclei in it, all kind of regularly arranged as it's a solid. Because the gap is similar to the size of the wavelength, diffraction will occur, and we'll see a diffraction pattern if we were to have a screen installed at the other end. Now it'll be a single slit diffraction pattern, just considering kind of in one spot, with the electrons diffracting through one gap. We should know from our waves topic, the diffraction pattern of a single slit looks a bit like this. You've got a really big, wide central maximum, then you've got smaller minima and maxima decreasing in intensity away from the center. Now, realistically, with this experiment, it's in 3D, so the diffraction pattern will look more like a set of rings rather than this kind of 2D image here. So the de Broglie wavelength, to which we need to make the electrons travel similar to investigate the diffraction of the atoms between the atoms, should be roughly 10 to the minus 15 meters. So to make that happen, the mass of the electron is obviously unchanged, so 9.31 times 10 to the power minus 31 kilograms. The velocity needs to be, roughly speaking, 10 to the power 7 meters per second. So again, similar to the alpha particles from before, it's quite hard to get electrons and alpha particles to these speeds. This is why this is quite tricky to achieve. So what would we notice then if the electrons do diffract, because the gaps between the atoms is roughly the same as the wavelength of the electrons? So you notice from the setup here, and this looks very similar to the Rutherford scattering experiment, apart from we're using electrons, but we've got detectors kind of all around the edge to see the intensity of the particles detected. And the particles will obviously kind of diffract through different angles. So if we were to look at the intensity, using kind of Rutherford's scattering, we'd expect the curve to be a bit like this. Maximum would occur at 0 degrees angle, and then it would decrease the further away you get from that central part. However, if diffraction were to occur, the line would be slightly different. There might be some little bumps in it because of the different interference patterns we get. And this is actually what we observe. We observe Rutherford scattering, but kind of superposed on the top of it are the kind of maxima and minima we would get from an interference pattern. So we see the maximum there, the first maximum is when it's kind of raised up, and the minimum just next to it. So from this interference pattern, we can actually look at what angle that occurs at and see, well, what wavelength must the gaps between the atoms be to enable us to work out the radius of the nucleus. The general idea is that diffractions occur, and therefore the wavelength of the electrons must be similar to nuclear radius. If you set up the electron's wavelength just right, then you can basically use that to work out exactly what the nuclear radius is. Now, there is an equation for this. It's not on the AQA spec. It is on other specs, which is to use the minimum, the angle the first minimum occurs at, to use this equation to work out the nuclear radius, which, like I said, it's not on the AQA spec, but it's useful to know how you'd go about doing that anyway. Okay, so those are our three methods of kind of estimating the nuclear radius. Next we're going to look at is how it relates to nucleon number and how we can calculate the density of a nucleus. So consider one hydrogen nucleus, so one proton, and then I expand it to a helium nucleus. Hopefully it's obvious that the radius is going to increase. So in this case it doubles, so 2 protons means it's double the radius. However, the more protons and neutrons you add, that relationship won't hold. It's going to get bigger and bigger in a kind of form of a sphere. So we're going to look at how does a nuclear number affect the nuclear radius, and then how does it affect the density. The first thing to note here is that the nucleon number, the number of protons and neutrons, is roughly speaking proportional to the volume. So the nucleon number A is proportional to volume. Now the volume of a sphere is equal to 4/3 pi r cubed, so volume is proportional to r cubed. So using these two relationships, we can say nucleon number is proportional to r cubed. And stating that slightly differently, we can say a to the cube root, so stating that slightly differently, we can say the cube root of A is proportional to capital R, the radius of the nucleus. So any two things that are directly proportional, we can insert a constant of proportionality here. Now the constant in this case is R0, which is usually estimated to be 1.05 femtometers, or 1.05 times 10 to the minus 15 meters. You wouldn't be given this on your equation sheet for a couple of reasons we'll go into, but generally speaking it is just an estimate. So more likely than not in a question you'd be asked to calculate that first, or they'll tell it you in the question before you can use it. To work out R0, you might be given a graph of cube root of A and R, and then work out the gradient of that to give you R0, because it's R divided by the cube root of A. So to use this relationship, you just plug your numbers in once you've given R0 when you've calculated it. Now, what I think the coolest application of all this is you can work out the density of any nucleus using this idea here, using a bit of derivation. So to work out the mass of a nucleus, we need to know the number of nucleons times by the mass of each one. So we do nuclear number times by U atomic mass unit. Now, the volume of a nucleus, we said, is roughly speaking a sphere, so 4/3 pi r cubed. Now, instead of r down here, we're going to substitute in our equation r equals R0 and the cube root of A. So we're going to substitute that down here, and you might notice as soon as we plug that in, we can simplify things down quite neatly. I've got a third times by a cube, which is going to cancel down, meaning we've just got A on the bottom. We've also got A on the top, meaning we can cancel both those down and come up with our final expression for density, which equals the atomic mass unit divided by 4/3 pi R0. Now, all of these things are constants, so don't depend on the radius of the nucleus or the number of nucleons. If you plug those numbers in, you get a value of 3.4 times 10 to the 17 kilograms per meter cubed. So the important thing about this is the same for any nucleus, okay? Doesn't depend on nucleon number, doesn't depend on radius at all. And it's insanely big, okay? 3.4 times 10 to the 17 kilograms per meter cubed is as dense as a neutron star, and basically means what you'd have if you managed to crush all the atoms down so there's no empty space in any of them. If we had like a millimeter cubed of this, so very, very small, sort of grain of rice size, that would be basically 300 million kilograms just in a grain of rice, which is absolutely insane. So if you found that helpful, please like and subscribe and check out my other A-level videos if you found it useful.